Hi there, once again, I'm Donnelly from RotoBaller, and it is time to talk about those starts and sits here for week number 7 at the tight end position. But before we do, we have some public service announcements that we gotta get off our chest. First, remember, plenty can happen from Monday when this video is being recorded to Sunday's kickoff, so be sure to get into that RotoBaller Discord channel where experts are there to answer your starts and sit questions throughout the entire week. Second, we are officially on to the point of the season here in 2023 where bye weeks begin to creep up. We have 6 teams on a bye week here in week number 7. Those teams are the Carolina Panthers, the Cincinnati Bengals, the Dallas Cowboys, the Houston Texans, the New York Jets, and the Tennessee Titans. So that means if you have Dalton Schultz, Jake Ferguson, Ty Conklin, Hayden Hurts, you're going to need another option at tight end. And guess what? There's not a whole lot of options out there to begin with. We also have some notable injuries, such as Dalton Kincaid, who has been dealing with that concussion. Juwan Johnson, who's missed the last 3 contests for the Saints while dealing with a calf issue, as well as Hunter Henry, who was in and out of last week's contest with an ankle injury. Now, good news is that Pat Freiermuth is a candidate to return after the Steelers having their bye, although he hasn't practiced since suffering that hamstring injury. That all being said, here are your starts and sits for week number 7 at the tight end position. Starting with Dallas Goedert versus Miami. Welcome to Miami. Everybody on this Eagles team should be playing with a sense of urgency and with a little bit more sandpaper and grit going into week number 7. This is a prime time premier type matchup here in week number 7. And if the Eagles are going to win this game, they are going to need to keep up on the score clock with one of the greatest offenses since the 2013 Denver Broncos. Miami is averaging 37.2 points per game. Only those 2013 Broncos and the 1950 Los Angeles Rams were averaging more. Now, luckily for Philadelphia, Miami has allowed the 9th and 11th most fantasy points per game to the wide receiver and tight end position. Now, Goddard, he faces a Miami's back 7 that has allowed 34 receptions and 312 yards to date to tight ends. Now, Goddard has also seen some extra opportunities as of late, including 8 targets last week against the Jets after hauling in 8 passes for 117 yards against the Rams. All things are trending upwards for Dallas Goedert. Another tight end who's seen his stock rise here in recent weeks is Michael Mayer of the Las Vegas Raiders, and he takes on the Chicago Bears this week. Mayers is coming off his best game of his career just a few days after Friday the 13th. Coincidence? I think not. Mayer had a top 8 fantasy week thanks to 5 catches, 75 yards in that 21-17 victory over the New England Patriots last week. Jimmy Garoppolo looks like he is most likely going to miss this start. However, even with Aiden O'Connell or Brian Hoyer, the Raiders should be able to take advantage of a Bears defense that is allowing 13.87 fantasy points per game to the tight end position, which is the 8th most. The 332 yards surrendered is the 7th most, so if the Bears do what everyone thinks they're going to do, they're probably going to put a little extra attention there on Devontae Adams, which means we are going to see Mayer poised for another top 12 fantasy week. This after seeing a 67% route participation rate, a 19% target share, and a 27% targets per route run last week. Now, if you want to go deep, you're looking for a sleeper here at the tight end position because there's nothing else out there. How about Kade Auton this week? Yes, he's going against a Falcons team that's been tough against wide receivers, tough against running backs, not so much against tight ends so far this season, as they are allowing the 7th most fantasy points to the position so far this year. In fact, they've surrendered 315 yards and 3 scores to the position while allowing 14.25 fantasy points per game. So if you are stuck and going dumpster diving at the tight end position, then Auton is a player that gives you some opportunities, at least in fantasy. Perhaps Auton can be this week's Quinton Morris, for crying out loud. That said, Taysom Hill is another great start, especially if Juwan Johnson misses his 4th straight game. And if available for this week, Pat Freiermuth is a must start in a favorable matchup against the Rams, both whom I would rank over Kade Auton. Now, I don't like to use the word sit, especially when we have so many bye weeks, so this is going to be my temper your expectations portion of the show, and it starts with Sam Laporta of the Detroit Lions going against the Baltimore Ravens, who are the premier team in the NFL and in fantasy when it comes to defending the tight end position. on the season, Baltimore has yet to allow a tight end to find the end zone, and they've held him to 151 yards and just 22 interceptions. Laporta, he has played as well as any tight end in the league this season, and with bye weeks, you're going to find it very hard to sit him, but be prepared as the production could be minimalized this week. Laporta is also dealing with a calf injury that could flare up at any second. In fact, it did kind of limit him to just 4 catches and 36 yards last week, so that's something we also need to be aware of. Overall, Baltimore has allowed just 126.3 passing yards per game over the last 3 weeks, which could further complicate things. Another tight end that has some kind of complicated matters at hand to deal with is Cole Kmet as he faces the Las Vegas Raiders. It's really tough to put fantasy value on Kmet this week, not knowing what Justin Fields' status looks like heading into week number 7. We know that Fields has that dislocated thumb, and it's going to be difficult for him to grip the ball. That's going to be problematic, especially at the quarterback position. Who would have known? But what we do know is historically the Raiders have struggled when it comes to defending opposing tight ends. But they did limit Hunter Henry and Mike Gesicki to 4 catches for 35 yards last week. And then if you go back to week number 5, Luke Musgrave had just 6 catches for 34 yards. So there's some kind of thing here to be working with. The Raiders' defense against tight ends, maybe their luck is changing. Vegas has allowed just 277 yards and 3 scores to the position, which should tell you pretty much all you need to know what happened during weeks 1 through 4. So Kmet, he has an opportunity. However, he is coming off just a 2-catch, 9-yard performance against the Vikings, so perhaps poor quarterback play will once again benefit the Raiders this week. And finally, you are sitting Zach Ertz versus the Seattle Seahawks. When you think of the Seattle defense, you are thinking about a team that is allowing nearly 47 fantasy points per game to the wide receiver position. However, what you're not thinking about is the fact that they are allowing the 5th fewest fantasy points this season on a per game basis to the tight end position, allowing just 7.66 thanks to 203 passing yards, which they've yielded, and not allowing a single touchdown from a tight end so far. Another thing working against Ertz this week was his lack of productivity last week in a matchup against the Rams, who had been the 4th most favorable matchup for tight ends this season. What did he do? He walked away with just 2 catches and 22 yards in a most favorable matchup. That's not good. This tight end position is going to be a crapshoot each and every single week, so it's best to try and limit any kind of mistakes moving forward. Who are the tight ends you're starting and who are the tight ends you're sitting? Well, here we go. Let's go rapid fire. Dallas Goedert faced the Miami Dolphins this week, who have allowed the 11th most fantasy points to the position, and Goedert has 17 targets in his last 2 contests. While it's not Friday the 13th or Halloween yet, the Chicago Bears should fear Michael Mayer, who's coming off his best game of his career. Now you need a deep sleeper. How about Kade Auton in a good matchup against the Falcons? Taysom Hill, Pat Freiermuth are also great options as well. Now who you're sitting, you're going to sit Sam Laporta versus the Baltimore Ravens, one of the best tight ends in fantasy versus one of the best defenses in fantasy against tight ends. Defense wins championships. Another tight end to sit is Cole Kmet, who struggled to produce without Justin Fields last week and could be facing a Raiders team with a limited Fields once again. Also, sit Zach Ertz. He could not produce with a top 5 most favorable matchup. What do you think is going to happen with a matchup not nearly as good this week? What is good is the RotoBaller YouTube channel, so make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and make sure you're following for plenty more fantasy football analysis.